I'm Kayla Morgan, 28, and my world shattered over breakfast. We've booked a trip to Italy. Just the six of us, Dad announced, beaming at my siblings. You're not invited. The table fell silent as everyone stared at their plates. 10 years of being the family scapegoat culminated in this moment, excluded from our parents' 30th anniversary celebration, while my four siblings got to go. What Dad didn't know was I'd already discovered the family secret he'd kept for decades, and this Italy trip would be the perfect opportunity for me to finally expose the truth about our so-called perfect family. If you're watching this and have ever felt like the outsider in your own family, you're not alone. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments and hit subscribe to join others who've survived family drama. My story gets wild, so grab something to drink and settle in while I tell you how I turned this Italy trip exclusion into the revenge that changed everything. The Morgans were what people in our upscale Connecticut neighborhood called old money perfect. From the outside, we were enviable. My father Richard ran Morgan Financial Solutions, a wealth management firm that catered to the ultra-rich. My mother Diana was the quintessential socialite charity galas, country club memberships, and designer everything. They had built a reputation as pillars of the community, generous donors to the right causes, and parents to 5 successful children. Well, 4 successful children and me. There was Emma, 32, the golden child. Harvard Law graduate, married to a surgeon, mother to 2 perfect children, and partner at a prestigious firm. She could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. The twins, Tyler and Trevor, 30, were the adventurous ones. Former college athletes who started their own outdoor adventure company that was featured in Outside magazine. They were always a unit, always protected by each other and by my parents, who found their risk-taking charming rather than concerning. Jessica, 26, was the baby, the princess. Fresh out of design school and already making waves with her interior design business, helped along by Mom's connections who hired her to redecorate their summer homes. And then there was me, Kayla, stuck in the middle at 28. I worked as a research librarian at the university, a job my father called hiding in books instead of living in the real world. I had a small apartment instead of a showcase home. I was single, childless, and according to family legend, difficult since childhood. The truth was, I'd always been the family scapegoat. When the twins broke an antique vase playing indoor catch at age 10, I got blamed for not watching them properly. When Emma crashed the car at 16, I somehow distracted her from the passenger seat. When Jessica struggled in math, it was because I made her feel inadequate by getting good grades in that subject. For years, I told myself it was all in my head. But recently, the exclusion had become so blatant I couldn't ignore it. Last Christmas, everyone got personalized gifts, while I received a generic gift card. On Mother's Day, I wasn't included in the group text planning Mom's surprise. Dad's retirement party featured a slideshow of family photos where I appeared in exactly 3, always at the edge, partially cropped out. Still, nothing prepared me for that breakfast. It was our monthly family brunch tradition, held at my parents' colonial mansion with its sweeping views of Long Island Sound. The housekeeper, Angela, had prepared a spread of Belgian waffles, smoked salmon, and fresh fruit that nobody was touching, as Dad made his announcement. "Your mother and I have been planning our 30th anniversary," he said, cutting into his waffle with surgical precision. "We've booked a villa in Tuscany for 2 weeks this summer. Just the 6 of us, the 6 of us. Mom, Dad, Emma, Tyler, Trevor, and Jessica. Not 7, not including me. It'll be amazing," Mom added, not looking at me. "The villa has its own vineyard, and we've arranged private tours of Florence and Rome." Emma at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Sounds wonderful," she said, stealing a glance my way. "We're bringing the kids too," she added, referring to my niece and nephew, ages 4 and 6. Dad hired a nanny to come along. So not just 6, 8, plus a nanny. Everyone but me. "When exactly is this trip?" I asked, keeping my voice steady though my hands were shaking under the table. "July 15th to 29th, Dad replied, finally looking at me. We know you can't take time off work, Kayla. And honestly, it's a couples and kids thing. You wouldn't enjoy it. I wouldn't enjoy Italy? Who wouldn't enjoy Italy? And I had more vacation time saved up than anyone at the table, a fact I'd mentioned just last month. I see, was all I said, taking a sip of my coffee to hide my trembling lip. The conversation moved on as if nothing had happened. Tyler and Trevor debated which camera equipment to bring. Jessica wondered aloud if she could meet any Italian fashion designers. Mom reminded everyone to renew their passports. I sat through 30 more minutes of this before excusing myself with a fabricated work emergency. Nobody questioned it. Nobody asked me to stay. In my car, parked down the street from their house, I finally let the tears come. 10 years of being the family outcast, and still, this hit differently. This was so public, so final, so cruel in its casualness. What my family didn't know was that 3 months earlier, I had discovered why I had always been treated differently. A secret that would explain everything and potentially destroy the perfect Morgan family image forever. And their Italy trip was about to give me the perfect opportunity for the family reckoning that was long overdue. 3 months before that fateful breakfast, my grandmother Eleanor had fallen and broken her hip. As the only family member without pressing commitments, I was designated to help her move from her colonial farmhouse to an assisted living facility. Grandma Eleanor was my father's mother, a stern New England woman who had always been cold toward me compared to her other grandchildren. Still, I did my duty, sorting through 80 years of accumulated possessions, deciding what would fit in her new one-bedroom apartment. On the third day of cleaning, I ventured into the attic to look for photo albums she had requested. The space was dusty and cramped, filled with trunks and boxes dating back decades. In the corner, I found a locked metal file box. The key was taped to the bottom. Classic Grandma Eleanor, practical even in her secrets. Inside were documents organized with meticulous care: birth certificates, death certificates, marriage licenses, and medical records for every family member. I found my father's folder, then each of my siblings. When I reached for the tab labeled Kayla, what I found made me sink to the floor in shock. Adoption papers. Medical records not from my mother's obstetrician, but from a different hospital entirely. A birth certificate listing my biological mother as Diana Morgan, but my biological father as Marco Rossi. Marco Rossi. The name was vaguely familiar. I pulled out my phone and searched. A LinkedIn profile appeared. Marco Rossi, investment banker, Florence, Italy. With shaking hands, I dug further into the box. In an envelope marked confidential, I found letters between my grandmother and my father, dating back to the year before I was born. The truth emerged in fragmented, painful sentences. Diana's indiscretion with Marco must remain private. The partnership will survive if we handle this correctly. The child need never know. Marco has agreed to return to Italy if we buy out his share. We will raise her as a Morgan. Richard, it's the only way. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. My mother had an affair with my father's business partner. I was the result. My father had agreed to raise me as his own to save the marriage and the business, but Marco was pushed out and sent back to Italy. The timeline matched perfectly. Marco left the business when I was just 3 months old. I confronted my grandmother that evening. Her face paled when she saw the box in my arms. "You had no right," she whispered. "I had every right," I countered. "This is my life." She sank into her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 82 years. "Your father has tried his best, has he? By treating me like an outsider my entire life? By punishing me for something that wasn't my fault?" Grandmother's eyes watered. "Richard never bonded with you as a baby. You look so much like Marco, those eyes, that smile. Every time he looked at you, he saw his best friend's betrayal. And my mother? Why did she go along with this?" Diana made a mistake and paid for it by watching her husband resent her daughter. She tried to compensate by overindulging the other children. Grandmother took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "What will you do with this information, Kayla?" "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. But over the next few weeks, a plan began to form. I researched Marco Rossi extensively. He had returned to his native Florence, after leaving Morgan Financial Solutions, eventually starting his own successful investment firm. He had married, but had no other children. His wife had died 5 years earlier from cancer. I debated confronting my family immediately, but decided against it. They had kept this secret for 28 years. They would only deny it if confronted directly. I needed leverage, perfect timing, and irrefutable evidence. I drafted several emails to Marco before finally sending one. It was simple and direct. My name is Kayla Morgan. I recently discovered that you are my biological father. I was raised by Diana and Richard Morgan in Connecticut. I have proof of our relationship and would like to meet you when I'm ready. Please confirm if you're willing to have this conversation. His reply came within hours. Kayla, I have waited for this email for 28 years. I have a photo of you as a newborn that I've kept all these years. I wanted to contact you when you turned 18, but the agreement I signed prevented it. I would be honored to meet you, whenever and wherever you choose. With great emotion and hope, Marco. Attached was a photo of him holding a tiny infant with a shock of dark hair, me. With the same distinctive eyes we shared. I spent the next weeks learning everything I could about Marco and making plans. I wasn't sure yet what form my confrontation with the Morgans would take, but I knew one thing. I wanted answers, acknowledgement, and maybe, finally, justice. When my father announced the Italy trip that excluded me, it felt like the universe had handed me the perfect opportunity. They were going to Italy where Marco lived. It couldn't have been more perfect if I'd planned it myself. I retreated to my apartment after that devastating breakfast, a modest two-bedroom in a converted Victorian near the university library where I worked. While my siblings lived in luxury homes partly funded by generous loans from our parents that mysteriously never needed repayment, I had built my life brick by brick on my own. For the first time, I was grateful for that independence. No one could threaten to cut me off financially. I had nothing to lose. I poured a glass of wine and called my best friend Megan. We'd met in college and she was the only person who truly understood the Morgan family dynamic, having witnessed it firsthand over the years. They're going to Italy without you? Megan's voice rose in disbelief. That's not just rude, Kayla. That's deliberately cruel. It gets worse, I said, and told her about Marco. Holy shit, she whispered. You have to confront them. All of them. Together. I've been thinking about that, I replied. But a simple confrontation doesn't seem enough. After everything, what are you thinking? I stared out my window at the spring evening, cherry blossoms swirling in the breeze. I think I'm going to follow them to Italy. My plan took shape over the next few days. Through Emma's husband Scott, who liked me and disapproved of how the family treated me, I learned the details of their trip. The family had rented Villa Speranza outside Florence for 2 weeks. I knew their arrival date and had a general idea of their planned excursions. I booked my own flight to Florence, arriving 2 days before them. I found a small apartment to rent near the historic center, walking distance to the major attractions they would surely visit. My savings account took a hit, but I had been living frugally for years. This would be worth every penny. Next, I contacted Marco again, suggesting we meet in Florence during those specific dates. His enthusiasm was both touching and validating. He offered to help with my expenses, which I politely declined. This was something I needed to do independently. There's something else you should know, I wrote to him. The Morgan family will be in Florence at the same time. They don't know I'm coming, or that I've contacted you. His reply was measured but resolute. I understand. After 28 years of secrets, perhaps it's time for truth. Whatever you decide, I support you. I hired a local photographer who specialized in documentary-style photography, explaining that I wanted to capture a family reunion. I didn't share the full story, just enough to make clear I needed someone discreet, who could capture authentic moments without being obvious. I created private social media accounts where I could potentially share the truth if necessary. Not to humiliate my family, but to ensure they couldn't deny what had happened once we returned to the States. As the weeks passed, I refined my approach. This wasn't about public humiliation or screaming matches. I wanted the precise, surgical removal of decades of lies, performed in a way that would make denial impossible. I shopped for a new wardrobe, pieces that made me feel confident and strong. I got my hair cut and colored, not to be unrecognizable, but to be the best version of myself. I started working out with a personal trainer, not to lose weight, but to gain strength, both physical and mental. Every night before falling asleep, I questioned whether I really wanted to go through with this. Was I prepared to potentially destroy my family? Did I actually want to hurt them the way they had hurt me? But then I would remember my father's casual, just the six of us, and my resolve would harden again. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. And perhaps, after the truth, something better could emerge from the ashes of our pretend perfect family. With 1 week left before my flight to Florence, I decided to dig deeper into the Morgan family secrets. If I was going to expose the truth, I wanted to understand exactly what I was dealing with. My position as a research librarian gave me access to archives and databases that most people couldn't navigate. I started with news archives, searching for information about Morgan Financial Solutions during the period when Marco would have been my father's partner. What I found was illuminating. The business had grown exponentially right after Marco's departure, following the acquisition of several clients who had previously been exclusive to a competing firm. Clients that, according to business news from the time, had strong Italian connections that Marco had been cultivating. I needed more specific information. With some trepidation, I reached out to Janet Peters, my father's longtime assistant, who had retired 3 years earlier. We'd always had a good relationship. She'd sneak me candy when I visited the office as a child, and later helped me with my college applications. She agreed to meet me for coffee. "I always wondered when you might come asking questions," Janet said after we exchanged pleasantries. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her eyes sharp behind designer frames. "You have his smile, you know." "Marcus," I said, not a question. She nodded. "Smart girl. You figured it out. Did everyone know except me?" "No, actually. Your father was paranoid about it getting out. Only 3 people at the firm knew. Me, the legal counsel, and your father's partner, Brad. Your siblings don't know, as far as I'm aware." "What really happened, Janet? Between my father and Marco?" Janet stirred her coffee slowly. "They were best friends before they were business partners. College roommates. Started the firm together in their 20s. Equal partners with complementary skills, Richard the analytical one, Marco the people person. And then? The affair happened during a rough patch in your parents' marriage. Your mother and Marco were thrown together planning a charity event while your father was consumed with work." She sighed. "When Diana got pregnant, tests confirmed Marco was the father. Richard was devastated but also pragmatic. The scandal would have ruined the business. So he made a deal with Marco. A very one-sided deal," Janet confirmed. "Marco was bought out for a fraction of what his share was worth, using fabricated compliance violations as leverage. Documents were forged, suggesting Marco had violated finance regulations. He was given a choice: take the deal and leave the country, or face potential criminal charges and never see you at all." "That's extortion," I whispered. "It was certainly unethical," Janet agreed. "The paperwork was handled outside normal channels. I've kept copies of everything, in case the truth ever needed to come out." She pulled a USB drive from her purse and slid it across the table. "I always liked Marco. And I've always had a soft spot for you, Kayla. You deserved better than what you got in that family." The USB drive contained scans of original documents showing the fraudulent nature of Marco's departure, falsified records, the predatory buyout agreement, and most damning, emails between my father and the firm's attorney discussing how to create compliance issues to force Marco out. My research didn't stop there. I reached out to extended family members, starting with Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, who had always been somewhat estranged from the family. "Diana was always the perfect one," Susan told me over the phone. "I was the screw-up. But perfect Diana has been functioning on Valium and white wine for 20 years. Did you know she did a stint in rehab when you were about 4? The family called it exhaustion. But it was alcohol dependency. Richard threatened to take all the kids if she didn't get her act together. Uncle James, my father's brother, was equally revealing over lunch at his boat club. Richard's always been obsessed with appearances, he said, nursing a scotch. He preaches family loyalty. But I know for a fact he's had at least 3 affairs over the years. He's careful, though. Very careful. Cousin Rebecca, Emma's age, and once her best friend, met me for a hike in the state park. I stopped coming to Morgan family events because of how they treated you, she admitted as we climbed a steep trail. The way your father would subtly put you down, how your mother would praise everyone's achievements but ignore yours. It was uncomfortable to watch. Emma and I fell out when I confronted her about it in college. She said I didn't understand the complicated family dynamics. That was code for Kayla deserves it. The most disturbing discovery came when I accessed the family's shared cloud storage, a repository I had legitimate access to but rarely used. Searching through years of documents, I found Emma's college admission essay titled Family Challenges and Personal Growth. In it, she wrote about the difficult dynamics of having a sister who required special handling due to emotional issues. She positioned herself as the mature older sister who helped her parents manage Kayla's outbursts and unreasonable expectations. The essay was fiction, crafting a narrative of a troubled sister to make Emma look compassionate and mature. I found a text message thread between all 4 of my siblings from just 6 months earlier, discussing how to handle Kayla at the upcoming Christmas gathering. Jessica had written, "Just make sure she's not in too many of the photos. Dad always gets weird about it after." Trevor had replied, "Can we seat her at the kiddie table again? Worked last year, lol." The final piece fell into place when I discovered records from a family therapy session my parents had attended when I was 12. The therapist's notes, which had somehow ended up scanned and saved in my mother's digital files, included a damning quote from my father. "I know it's wrong, but I can't help resenting her. Every time I look at Kayla, I see Marco. I try, but I can't get past it." By the time I finished my investigation, any doubts I had about my plan had evaporated. This wasn't just about me being excluded from a family trip. This was about decades of deliberate emotional abuse, orchestrated by my father and enabled by my mother and siblings. The Italy confrontation wasn't just justified, it was necessary. For my own healing, and perhaps for the family's as well. As I packed my suitcase for Florence, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth, no matter how painful, was about to come out. And with it, perhaps, would come freedom for all of us. I wonder if any of you watching have ever uncovered family secrets that changed how you saw your entire childhood. If you have, drop a comment below. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone in these experiences helps us find the courage to face difficult truths. This story continues with what happened when I arrived in Italy, and trust me, it gets even more intense. Florence in early summer was everything the travel blogs promised. Renaissance splendor bathed in golden light, the air scented with jasmine and fresh bread from corner bakeries. Under different circumstances, I would have been enchanted immediately. But as my taxi wound through narrow streets toward my rented apartment, my stomach churned with anxiety. In 48 hours, my family would arrive in this same city, unaware that their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. My apartment was a small studio in an ancient building near the Ponte Vecchio, with a tiny balcony overlooking a courtyard where an elderly man practiced cello each evening. It was modest, but perfect for my needs, central location, walking distance to major landmarks my family would likely visit. After settling in, I messaged Marco to confirm our meeting the following day. We had arranged to meet at a quiet cafe away from the main tourist areas, a place called Cafe Letterario in the Oltrarno district. I barely slept that night, rehearsing what I would say to Marco, imagining his face, wondering if I would see myself in his features. By morning, I was exhausted but too wired to notice, running on adrenaline and triple espressos as I made my way to our meeting. The cafe was tucked between an antique bookshop and a leather workshop. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table in the corner, ordering a cappuccino with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Then he walked in, and time seemed to stop. Marco Rossi was tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair and olive skin. He moved with the confident grace of someone comfortable in their own skin. But what struck me most were his eyes, dark brown with gold flecks around the pupils. My eyes. The eyes I'd seen in the mirror every day of my life without knowing their origin. He spotted me immediately, as if drawn by some invisible force. His step faltered, and I saw his chest rise with a sharp intake of breath. "Kayla," he said, his voice rough with emotion. No question, just certainty. I stood on shaky legs. "Marco." We didn't embrace immediately. Instead, we stood there, drinking in each other's features with wonder. I saw my smile in his, my hands with their long fingers, even the way I tilted my head when thinking all reflected back at me. "You are so beautiful," he finally said, his English perfect with just a hint of Italian accent. "Even more than your pictures." "You've seen pictures of me?" He nodded, eyes glistening. "Your grandmother sent them, once a year around your birthday, always with strict instructions never to contact you." This revelation hit me hard. Grandmother Eleanor, who I had thought was merely cold toward me, had actually maintained a secret connection with Marco all these years. Finally, we embraced, and I felt a sense of recognition so profound it left me breathless. This was my father, my blood. The missing piece I hadn't known was missing. We spent hours talking, moving from coffee to lunch, sharing our lives. Marco showed me photos of his family, my Italian family, including cousins, close to my age. He explained how he had built his business back up after leaving America, how he had married but his wife had been unable to have children due to health issues. "She knew about you," he said softly. "Elisa always said there was a hole in our family where you should have been. Before she died, she made me promise that if you ever found me, I would do everything possible to build a relationship with you." When I asked about his history with my parents, his account matched what Janet had told me. He and Richard had been best friends since college. The affair with Diana had been brief but intense, a mistake made during a period when she and Richard were essentially separated in all but name. "When she told me she was pregnant, I wanted to do the right thing," Marco explained. "I offered to step aside from the business, to move away, but provide financial support. Instead, Richard saw an opportunity to take full control of the company. He threatened to use his connections to have me deported and blacklisted in the finance industry worldwide unless I took his terms, which were a buyout at 30 cents on the dollar for my share of the business, a binding legal agreement never to contact you or Diana, immediate return to Italy." Marco's eyes hardened with an old anger. "I had no choice. If I fought, I risked never being part of your life at all." He pulled out his wallet and removed a worn photograph, baby me, hours old, with Marco holding me in the hospital. "This is the only time I ever held you. The nurse took pity on me and sneaked me in to see you before I had to leave." I was crying now, mourning the relationship we should have had, the lifetime of memories stolen from us. "I have something for you," Marco said, placing a folder on the table. Proof of what Richard did. The real documentation of our partnership agreement, records of clients that were legally mine that he stole, evidence of the fabricated compliance violations. I kept everything in case someday you came looking for answers. That evening, Marco introduced me to his sister Sophia and her family, who welcomed me with tearful embraces and exclamations over our resemblance. We ate homemade pasta in their apartment, filled with family photos, many of which now included me, as Sophia insisted on documenting every moment of our first meeting. "You have cousins in Rome, Naples, even one in Milan who is a librarian like you," Sophia told me, squeezing my hand. "They are all so excited to meet you, the American cousin we have heard about for years." For 2 days I experienced the warmth of my Italian family, the connection I had always craved. But reality couldn't be held at bay forever. My mother texted that evening, "Landed in Florence. Villa is even more beautiful than the pictures. Emma's kids love the pool." Using a contact Marco had introduced me to, a local tour guide named Gabriella who knew the city intimately, I kept track of my family's movements. She reported back that they had lunch reservations at a famous restaurant in the city center the following day, after a planned morning at the Uffizi Gallery. I wasn't ready for a confrontation yet, but fate had other plans. While browsing leather goods at the historic Mercato Centrale the next morning, I literally bumped into Jessica. "Kayla?" Her perfectly glossed mouth fell open in shock. "What are you doing here?" "Surprise," I said weakly. Jessica looked around nervously. "Does Dad know you're here?" "No. And I'd prefer to keep it that way for now." Her perfectly maintained facade cracked, just slightly. "This isn't a coincidence, is it?" "No." She pulled me to a quieter corner of the market. "Look, what happened with the trip invitation was wrong. I told Dad that. We all did. Actually, even Emma." This surprised me. "You did?" Jessica nodded, looking genuinely distressed. "He was adamant. Said you wouldn't enjoy it, that you'd bring down the mood. Mom didn't fight him on it." She hesitated. "Dad hasn't been himself lately. He's been having these episodes. Chest pains, shortness of breath. The doctor thinks it might be his heart. That's partly why this trip was planned, a stress-free family vacation, before more tests when we get home." My well-constructed plan suddenly felt shaky. Was I about to confront a man with a potential heart condition? Would the shock hurt him physically? "Jess, there's something you should know," I began, but Jessica's phone buzzed. "It's Mom. I need to get back to them. They think I'm just shopping." She squeezed my arm. "Please don't make a scene, Kayla. Whatever you're planning, Dad's health might not handle it." As she hurried away, I stood frozen among the bustling market stalls. My righteous anger now competed with concern. I called Marco. "What if this confrontation hurts him physically?" I asked. "I want the truth to come out, but I don't want to cause a medical emergency." Marco's response was gentle but firm. "The truth does not cause heart attacks, Kayla. Decades of stress from maintaining lies might. You are not responsible for the physical consequences of his choices." His words steadied me. I had come too far to back out now. The confrontation would happen, but I would proceed with caution. The next day, everything was in place for what I had started thinking of as the revelation. My family had dinner reservations at La Terrassa, an upscale restaurant with a stunning view of the Arno River. Marco and I had secured a table nearby. The photographer would be seated at the bar, camera ready but discreet. As the sun set over Florence, painting the ancient buildings in shades of amber and gold, I prepared for the moment that would change everything. For better or worse, by midnight, there would be no more secrets in the Morgan family. La Terrassa was everything an upscale Florentine restaurant should be: elegant, without being stuffy, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the Arno River and the city's Renaissance skyline. Crystal glasses caught the light from artful chandeliers, and the quiet hum of conversation was punctuated by occasional laughter and the clink of silverware. Marco and I arrived first, claiming our strategic table with a clear view of the entrance and the reserved table for 7, where my family would soon be seated. I wore a simple black dress that Marco's sister Sophia had helped me select, my hair swept up in a style that emphasized my resemblance to my biological father. Our photographer, Alessandra, was already positioned at the bar, her professional camera disguised as casual tourist equipment. She had been thoroughly briefed: capture reactions, not just faces. The story was in the emotions. Marco squeezed my hand under the table. "Are you ready for this?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." At precisely 8 o'clock they arrived. My father led the procession, still handsome at 62 with his silver hair and tailored suit. My mother followed, elegant in a designer dress, her smile fixed and practiced. Then came Emma and her husband Scott, the twins Tyler and Trevor, and finally Jessica, who visibly faltered when she saw me. The children were presumably back at the villa with their nanny. They were seated without noticing us, ordering wine and examining menus. My father was animated, gesturing as he spoke, my mother nodding at appropriate intervals. From a distance, they looked like the perfect family, enjoying a perfect vacation. I waited until they had ordered and received their wine. Then, with a deep breath, I stood up. Marco remained seated as planned. His presence would be the second shock, not the first. I approached their table slowly. Jessica saw me first, her eyes widening in alarm. Then Emma, who nudged Scott. The twins, engaged in their own conversation, were the last to notice. My father was mid-sentence when he registered the sudden silence at the table. He turned, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to anger in the span of seconds. "Kayla, what the hell are you doing here?" His voice cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. "Hello, Dad," I said calmly. "Surprise." "This is unacceptable," he hissed, looking around to see if other diners were watching. "You were not invited on this trip." "Richard," my mother murmured, placing a restraining hand on his arm. "Not here. I've been in Florence for a few days," I continued, maintaining my composure. "I've had an interesting time discovering family I never knew I had." My father's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" Emma asked, looking between us. "Should I tell them, Dad? Or would you prefer to explain why I was excluded from this trip? Why I've been excluded from this family my entire life?" "Kayla, if this is about the invitation, we can discuss it later," my mother said, her social mask firmly in place. "This isn't the appropriate venue." "Actually, I think a public place is perfect," I replied. "Less chance of the truth being buried again." Trevor stood up, always the first to act. "Kayla, you're making a scene. Whatever issue you have." "My issue," I interrupted, "is that I recently discovered I'm not biologically Richard's daughter. My real father is his former business partner, Marco Rossi, the partner he forced out of their company using fraudulent documents after discovering Mom's affair. The truth that's been hidden from me for 28 years while I was treated as an outsider in my own family." The stunned silence that followed was broken only by my mother's sharp intake of breath. "That's ridiculous," my father finally managed, though his pallor suggested otherwise. "Is it?" I turned and gestured to Marco, who now approached the table. "Perhaps you'd like to say hello to your old friend." The sight of Marco was like a physical blow to my father. He actually recoiled, gripping the edge of the table. My mother made a small, wounded sound. "Marco," she whispered. "Hello, Diana," he said quietly. "Richard. It's been a long time." The twins looked completely lost. Emma's analytical mind was clearly racing to process this revelation. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "This is absurd," my father blustered, recovering slightly. "You can't just appear and make these wild accusations." "They're not accusations," I interrupted, opening my bag to retrieve copies of the documents I'd brought. "They're facts. I have the adoption papers, the medical records, the emails between you and grandmother, planning how to handle the situation, the falsified compliance reports you created to force Marco out." I placed them on the table one by one. "And Marco has kept his own evidence all these years. The real partnership agreement. Proof of the clients you stole. Everything." Scott, always practical, picked up the papers and began examining them. "These appear legitimate," he said quietly to Emma, who looked like she might be sick. "You had no right," my father said, his voice shaking. "Those are private family matters." "My existence is not a private family matter," I replied. "It's my life. A life that's been shaped by your resentment and rejection because I reminded you of Marco. A fact confirmed by your own words to your therapist when I was 12. My mother began to cry silently, mascara tracking down her perfectly made-up face. "Mom," Emma said sharply, "is this true? Is Marco Kayla's biological father?" My mother looked up, first at me, then at Marco. The truth was written plainly in her expression. "Yes," she finally whispered. "But Richard agreed to raise her as his own. We thought it was best." "Best for whom?" I asked. "Not for me. Not for Marco, who was forced to leave his own child. Only best for you and Dad, for the precious Morgan reputation." "You don't understand," my father said, his color now alarmingly red. "The scandal would have destroyed everything I'd built. So instead you destroyed me," I replied. "Made me the family scapegoat, excluded me from family photos, criticized everything I did, and finally, explicitly uninvited me from the family trip to the country where my real father lives, no less. That's quite a coincidence, Dad. The restaurant had grown quieter around us, other diners sensing the drama unfolding. I was vaguely aware of Alessandra discreetly capturing it all on camera. How did you find out? Jessica asked, her voice small. Grandmother's papers, when I was helping her move, followed by a lot of research. Janet had quite a bit to share about how Dad forced Marco out. Aunt Susan filled me in on Mom's rehab stay. Uncle James knew about Dad's affairs. My father's face contorted with fury. You went behind my back to my own family? My employees? You kept the truth of my existence from me for 28 years, I countered. I think that gave me the right to ask a few questions. Trevor and Tyler exchanged glances, their twin telepathy clearly active. So you're only our half-sister? Tyler asked. Genetically, yes. But I grew up thinking I was your full sister, loving you as such, even while being treated as less than. Emma suddenly pushed back from the table, standing to face our father. The family therapy sessions when we were teenagers, she said, her lawyer's mind connecting dots. You insisted Kayla's attitude problems were the reason we all had to go. But it was your inability to accept her, wasn't it? My father didn't answer, his breathing becoming labored as he loosened his tie. The Christmas gifts, Jessica added. The way you'd critique her choices, but praise ours for the same things. Dad, how could you do that to a child? And we enabled it, Emma continued, now turning to our siblings. We knew something was off about how Kayla was treated, but we never challenged it. We participated in it. The group texts about managing me at family gatherings, I suggested. The jokes about keeping me out of photos, seating me at the kids' table last Christmas, their guilty expressions confirmed they remembered. I trusted you all, I said, my voice finally breaking. I spent my life thinking there was something wrong with me, something that made me unlovable to my own family. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? My father suddenly clutched his chest, his face contorted in pain. Richard? My mother grabbed his arm. Richard, what's wrong? Chest, he gasped. Can't breathe. The confrontation immediately shifted to a medical emergency. Scott, with his medical background, took charge, helping my father to the floor while Trevor called for an ambulance. The restaurant manager cleared space and brought water. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, loading my pale father onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him out, his eyes locked with mine, filled with a complex mix of anger, fear, and something that might have been regret. My mother went with him in the ambulance, while the rest of us followed in taxis to the hospital. In the chaos, Marco stepped back, telling me he would wait at his home for news. This isn't how I wanted this to go, I told him as we parted. The truth rarely emerges in ways we can control, he replied gently. Call me when you can. At the hospital, we gathered in a sterile waiting room. The beautiful Florence evening, now a distant memory. The family vacation had turned into a family reckoning with potentially life-threatening consequences. As we waited for news of my father's condition, the walls between us, built over decades of secrets and complicity, began to crumble, and in their place, something new and uncertain began to take shape. The hospital waiting room in Florence was like hospital waiting rooms everywhere: uncomfortable chairs, fluorescent lighting, and the peculiar timelessness that comes with medical uncertainty. We sat in clusters, no longer the united front of the perfect Morgan family. Emma and Scott whispered in a corner. The twins paced the hallway, their usual energy constrained to repetitive movements. Jessica sat beside me, occasionally reaching for my hand. A doctor finally emerged, speaking in Italian until Scott identified himself as a physician and requested English. Your father has suffered what we call a stress-induced cardiac event, the doctor explained. Not a heart attack, but similar symptoms. His cardiac enzymes are normal, which is good news. We're keeping him overnight for observation, but he should make a full recovery with proper rest and medication. The collective relief was palpable. Whatever anger I felt toward my father, I didn't want him dead. The truth coming out shouldn't cost a life. Can we see him? My mother asked, her makeup long cried away. Briefly, 2 at a time, please. My mother went first, alone. When she returned, her expression was unreadable. Emma and Scott went next, then the twins. You should go, Jessica told me when it was her turn. I'm the last person he wants to see right now. Maybe. But I think you need to see him. For yourself. She was right. I followed her down the sterile hallway to my father's room. He looked diminished against the white sheets, monitors beeping steadily beside him. His eyes were closed when we entered, but opened when Jessica spoke. Dad? Kayla's here too. His gaze shifted to me, and I braced for anger. Instead, I saw exhaustion and something like resignation. I'll give you a minute, Jessica said, stepping out. We stared at each other in silence. The man who raised me, but never loved me as he should have. The man whose approval I had sought for decades without understanding why it was withheld. You couldn't have chosen a more public venue, he finally said, his voice weak. Would you have preferred I confront you privately, so you could dismiss me again? He closed his eyes briefly. I never expected Marco to keep proof all these years. Is that really what you want to talk about right now? Not the fact that you raised your wife's child with another man while systematically making that child feel unwanted? A monitor beeped more rapidly, and he took a deep breath, visibly trying to calm himself. I did what I thought was right at the time, he said finally. Keeping the family together, protecting the business. At my expense, he didn't deny it. I never intended. I told myself I was treating you all equally. I think I even believed it sometimes. The family therapy records say otherwise. You've been thorough. I'm a research librarian. It's what I do. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Your mother wanted to tell you when you turned 18. I convinced her it would only cause pain. It might have explained a lot, actually. Given me context for why I was always the outsider. He looked away. I'm not a good man, Kayla. I've made many mistakes. But keeping the business was never just about me. It supported all of us. Your education, your siblings' futures. That doesn't excuse how you treated me. No, he agreed quietly. It doesn't. A nurse appeared at the door. Time to rest, she said firmly. I stood to leave, then paused. I'm meeting Marco's family tomorrow. My biological father's family. They've welcomed me without hesitation, without conditions. Something flickered across his face. Regret, perhaps, or simply acknowledgement. I understand. I left him there, feeling strangely hollow. The confrontation I had imagined for months had happened, but the satisfaction I had anticipated was absent. Instead, I felt emptied out, as if a poison had been drained from my system, leaving me weak but cleaner somehow. In the hallway, I found my mother waiting. He needs rest, I told her. She nodded. Kayla, I need to explain. Not tonight, I said. I can't hear justifications right now. Not justifications, she said quietly. Just truth. When you're ready. Back in the waiting room, Emma approached me. Her usual perfect composure was shattered, her eyes red-rimmed. I need to speak with you. Privately. We found a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria. Emma, always direct, didn't waste time. I knew something wasn't right about how Dad treated you, she said. Not the full truth, but enough to know it was wrong, and I didn't stop it. Worse, I participated in it. The college essay, I said. About managing your difficult sister. She winced. You found that. And the group texts. The Christmas seating chart. I'm so sorry, Kayla. It's not an excuse, but we were raised in this dynamic where Dad's word was law. And his attitude toward you set the tone. I should have questioned it, especially once I was old enough to know better. Why didn't you? Emma stared into her untouched coffee. Partly cowardice, partly selfishness. It was easier to be the golden child, to accept the privileges without examining their cost to you. And once the pattern was established, it became self-reinforcing. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. I can't pretend we can just fix this overnight, I said. But I appreciate your honesty. Similar conversations followed with the twins, who approached together as always. Their apology was awkward but sincere, punctuated by Trevor's admission that they'd known for years something was off about how Dad treated you. Jessica was the most emotional, breaking down entirely. I always looked up to you, she confessed. You were so strong, so independent. I thought you chose to be separate from us. I never realized you were pushed away. A hospital counselor found us huddled in the waiting room and suggested a family meeting the next day. These revelations are traumatic for everyone, she explained. Professional mediation might help. We agreed to meet at the hospital's family counseling room the following afternoon. I messaged Marco to update him, and he offered to accompany me if I wanted. But this is your journey, he added. I'll respect whatever you decide. I spent a restless night at my apartment, my mind replaying the confrontation, questioning whether I had done the right thing, whether the damage could ever be repaired, or if I even wanted it to be. The next day, our family, fractured but present, gathered in a bland room with comfortable chairs and generic artwork. My father was there, released from medical monitoring, but still wearing a hospital bracelet. He looked older, diminished. The counselor, Dr. Ricci, spoke excellent English with a melodic Italian accent. This is a safe space for honest communication, she explained. No interruptions, no dismissals of feelings. My father started by stating he wasn't ready to discuss certain legal matters regarding the business, a typical deflection that Dr. Ricci gently redirected. Today isn't about business, Mr. Morgan. It's about family relationships. My father struggled visibly, but finally admitted, I failed as a father to Kayla. I couldn't separate my feelings about the circumstances from my feelings about the child. That was wrong. My mother's confession was more direct. I chose my marriage over properly protecting my daughter, she said, tears streaming. I watched Richard distance himself from you, and instead of confronting him, I overcompensated with the other children. I told myself it balanced out somehow. It was cowardice. One by one, my siblings acknowledged their roles in the dynamic. But the real shock came when Marco arrived midway through the session, having been invited by my mother via text without my knowledge. He entered quietly, nodding respectfully to everyone before taking a seat slightly apart from the circle. My father stiffened but said nothing. I invited Marco because he is part of this story, my mother explained, and because I think it's time we all heard his perspective. Marco spoke carefully, describing his friendship with my father, the affair with my mother during a period when she and my father were essentially separated, and the devastating choice he was forced to make when she became pregnant. I wanted to be part of Kayla's life, he said. I offered many compromises, but Richard insisted on all or nothing. Either I disappeared completely, or he would use his connections to destroy my career and ensure I never saw Kayla at all. My father didn't deny it. I was angry, betrayed. I wanted to hurt both of you the way you hurt me. And you succeeded, Marco said quietly. But the person who suffered most was an innocent child. Dr. Ricci guided us through hours of painful conversation. No magic healing occurred, no instant forgiveness. But truth, long suppressed, finally had oxygen to breathe. As the session concluded, my father made a surprising announcement. I'm cutting the trip short. I'll be flying home tomorrow for follow-up medical appointments. He looked around the room. The rest of you should stay. The villa is paid for. Enjoy Italy. My mother chose to return with him. The others decided to stay. Emma approached me as we left the hospital. We're regrouping at the villa tonight to figure out our new plans. Will you join us? No pressure, but you're welcome. Truly welcome. I hesitated. Actually, Marco invited me to his family home in the countryside. His sister is hosting a dinner to introduce me to more relatives. Of course, Emma said quickly. You should go. But maybe tomorrow? I suggested. I could come to the villa? We could. Start over, in a way. Her smile was genuine. I'd like that very much. As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. The family I was born into was broken, perhaps irreparably in some ways. But from the fragments, something new might emerge. And meanwhile, another family one, connected by blood and now by choice, was waiting to welcome me with open arms. 6 months after the Florence revelation, I stood in my new apartment in Boston, arranging flowers in a vase. My previous small place had been traded for this bright 2-bedroom with bay windows and a tiny balcony. Books lined the walls. My personal collection had finally found space to breathe. The doorbell rang, and I smoothed my hands down my dress before answering. The Morgan family, or what remained of it, stood in the hallway, bearing wine and dessert. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Everything's ready. My apartment warming party doubled as a celebration of my new position as head research librarian at a prestigious university archive, a job I had earned entirely on merit, though Marco's recommendation to a board member hadn't hurt. Emma entered first, her husband Scott following with their children. She was 5 months pregnant with her third child, a girl she and Scott had asked me to be godmother to, a gesture of new trust that had moved me deeply. The twins arrived together as always, but their dynamic had shifted subtly. They had recently invited me to become part owner of their adventure travel company, recognizing my organizational skills could complement their creative chaos. Jessica was the last to arrive, her arms full of houseplants. Housewarming gift, she explained, from my new shop. After returning from Italy, she had left interior design to open a botanical boutique, following a passion she had suppressed to please our parents. It's perfect, I said, genuinely touched. Jessica and I had developed the closest relationship among my siblings. She had even looked at an apartment in my building, though ultimately chose one closer to her shop. My father and mother were notably absent. The journey to healing that fractured relationship was moving at a different pace, slower, more tentative. We spoke monthly on the phone, our conversations still awkward but gradually becoming more authentic. The changes in my family weren't just in our relationships with each other, but in who we were becoming individually. Without the weight of pretense and performance, each of us had begun to explore who we really were, what we truly wanted. Emma had stepped back from her partner track at the law firm, choosing a position with better work-life balance. I realized I was killing myself to impress Dad, she had confessed. Trying to be perfect because that's what Morgans do. Tyler and Trevor had expanded their company to include adventure therapy programs for troubled teens, something they admitted was partly inspired by our family's painful journey. My mother had finally entered proper treatment for her alcohol dependency. My father, humbled by his health scare and the family upheaval, had begun therapy to address his controlling tendencies and emotional limitations. As for Marco and me, we were building the relationship we should have had all along. I had visited Italy twice more since that first trip, spending time with my biological father and his extended family. Marco had come to Boston once, and we had plans for regular visits. The most unexpected development was a tentative business collaboration between Marco and my father. After initial resistance, my father had reached out, acknowledging the unethical way he had forced Marco out and offering a partnership on a new venture as partial restitution. As we gathered around my dining table, I realized how much had changed. The conversation flowed naturally, without the strained performance quality of our previous family gatherings. We laughed at stories that would have been censored before, admitted vulnerabilities that would have been hidden. After dinner, as we moved to the living room with coffee and dessert, Emma raised her glass of sparkling cider. To Kayla, for having the courage to demand truth. Our family needed an earthquake, and you provided it. It wasn't just about revenge, I admitted, though that was part of it at first. It was about needing to be seen, really seen by my own family. We see you now, Tyler said simply. Better late than never, added Trevor. Jessica took my hand. And we're lucky you gave us a second chance. The doorbell rang again, an unexpected sound that momentarily confused me. I wasn't expecting anyone else. When I opened the door, my father stood there, looking uncertain. I hope I'm not intruding, he said. Your mother isn't feeling well, but I wanted to come, to see your new place. The room fell silent as he entered. This was his first social interaction with all the children together since Italy. He had met with each of us individually during the intervening months, working through decades of dysfunctional patterns, but this was different. He handed me a small wrapped package, a housewarming gift. Inside was an antique silver frame containing a photo I had never seen baby me, perhaps 6 months old, sleeping in my father's arms. We both looked peaceful. I found it while going through old albums, he said quietly. I had forgotten it existed. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was sincere. A reclaiming of a relationship that had gone off course from the beginning. Thank you, I said. Would you like some coffee? We're just having dessert. I'd like that, he replied. He greeted the others with handshakes and awkward hugs before taking a seat slightly apart from the group. I was just telling everyone, I continued, bringing him a cup of coffee, about my plans to visit Italy in July. Marco mentioned you might spend some time helping him organize his family archives, my father said, surprising me with his knowledge. Yes, exactly. Their family records go back centuries. Your grandfather on that side was a librarian too, wasn't he? My father asked. Marco told me that runs in their family. This small acknowledgement that I had another family, another heritage that was valid and real, felt significant coming from him. Actually, Dad, I said, the words still feeling complicated on my tongue, I was wondering if you'd like to come along on the next trip. Meet Marco's family properly. See Tuscany. The question hung in the air, weighted with history and possibility. My siblings exchanged glances, but remained silent. My father looked down at his coffee, then back at me. I'd like that very much, Kayla. If you're sure. I'm sure, I replied. And I was. Not because all was forgiven or forgotten, but because carrying anger forever would only continue to hurt me. The truth had come out. Accountability was ongoing. And healing, while not linear or guaranteed, was at least possible now. Later, as my family prepared to leave, my father lingered behind. I want you to know, he said awkwardly, that I'm proud of you, not just for your new job or this apartment, for your courage, your integrity, qualities I should have valued all along. The words I had wanted to hear my entire life finally spoken, not in the way I had imagined, but perhaps in a more authentic way than would have been possible before. Thank you, I said simply. After everyone had gone, I stood on my small balcony looking at the city lights. My phone pinged with a message from Marco. How was your gathering? Family is complicated, yes? I smiled as I typed back. Yes, but worth fighting for when it's real. And that was the truth I had discovered through this painful journey. Family, whether defined by blood, by history, or by choice, was worth fighting for, but only when it was built on honesty. The perfect Morgan family image had been shattered forever, but in its place, something authentic was slowly taking root. That, in the end, was the real victory. Not revenge, but truth. Not punishment, but growth. Not perfection, but reality messy, complicated, sometimes painful, but ultimately more nourishing than the most beautiful lie. I'd love to hear from you in the comments about your own family experiences. Have you ever had to confront difficult truths in your family? How did you handle it, and did it lead to healing or more pain? Every family has its secrets and struggles, and sometimes knowing we're not alone in these experiences helps us find our own path forward. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family healing is possible, even after decades of pain. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most important transformations